Okay, let's unpack this. Today we are doing a deep dive into some, let's just say, extraordinarily provocative source material.
That's putting it lightly.
It really is.
Right.
We're looking at excerpts from a religious sermon that's not just, a gentle critique of Christmas. It's a full-on, aggressive rejection of pretty much every tradition associated with the holiday.
Absolutely. For anyone listening who thinks they've heard all the arguments against celebrating Christmas, this source material just takes it to a whole other level. One core idea.
Which is what, exactly?
That all these practices we take for granted, the date, the tree, the gifts, are fundamentally rooted in what he calls heathenism or paganism.
It's an extreme view, for sure, but what's striking when you really analyze it is how meticulously it's all built. It's constructed on a very literal, word-for-word interpretation of specific scripture. So our mission today is really crucial. We're not here to endorse this or to judge it. We're just trying to act as impartial guides.
Right. We need to neutrally unpack the core claims, look at the specific traditions they're targeting, and really identify the scriptural foundation they're using to justify this total rejection.
Exactly, so that you, the listener, can walk away understanding the logic behind this powerful, I guess you'd call it a separationist position.
It's so important to see it as a structured theological argument. The speaker is drawing a very hard, very uncompromising line between what he defines as obedience to Scripture and what he calls the way of the heathen.
And when you hear the severity of the claims, you realize this isn't about personal preference for them.
Oh, not at all. This is a matter of salvation.
So let's start where he starts. The central claim that really kicks the whole thing off, the date itself. The source just comes right out and says that the idea Jesus was born on December 25th is a lie.
A lie. And he doesn't stop there. He immediately raises the stakes by saying that any pastors, any parents who teach this date are, therefore, liars themselves.
That is a powerful accusation to lead with.
It is. But it's not just an arbitrary accusation. The source provides what it sees as clear scriptural counter-evidence. It points directly to Luke chapter 1, verse 26.
And what does that verse say?
It describes the angel Gabriel appearing to Mary in what the text calls the 6th month.
The 6th month. Okay, so how does the speaker take that one detail, the 6th month, and use it to completely dismantle December 25th?
Well, the argument is that if you take the biblical 6th month and you map it onto our modern English calendar, it aligns pretty closely with June.
June.
Right. So if Mary gets the news in June and conceives then, you just calculate forward about 9 months.
And that puts the birth somewhere in, what, March?
Exactly. Early spring, maybe March of the following year. So according to this very strict chronological reading, a December birth is not just improbable, it's scripturally impossible.
So the date must have been manufactured for other reasons.
That's the conclusion. And that manufactured date then leads right into the foundational command that dictates the entire philosophy of the sermon, the one rule that underpins everything.
And where does that core command come from?
It all comes back to the Old Testament, specifically Jeremiah chapter 10. And the key command, which is repeated over and over again like a mantra in the source material, is in verse 2.
What is it?
Learn not the way of the heathen.
Learn not the way of the heathen. I mean, that's a direct command to separate yourself.
Yeah.
So what does the source say is the practical implication of that? Are they saying that choosing any Christmas tradition is literally a direct violation of that command?
Precisely. The source argues that if you participate in any of these customs, hanging a wreath, buying a tree, even just having a Christmas dinner, you are, by definition, learning and practicing the way of the heathen.
Wow. So it's not that you're just a misguided Christian.
No. It leads to the really stark conclusion that participants are literally heathens and worldly heathens, that they've separated themselves from what is true obedience to God's law. The whole theological framework is built on making an absolute difference between holy and unholy.
A phrase he pulls from another part of the Bible.
Yep, he draws that concept directly from Leviticus chapter 10, verse 10.
Okay, so let's dive into the physical symbols, because this is where the argument gets really grounded and very interesting. The source dedicates a lot of time to dismantling the Christmas tree.
Yeah, which most people just see as, harmless seasonal decor.
Right, but they don't see it as harmless or modern at all.
No, they see it as an ancient idol that's just been renamed. They connect the act of getting a Christmas tree directly back to that same chapter, Jeremiah 10. specifically verses 3 and 4.
What do those verses say?
Well, they argue the scripture is describing this exact practice. It talks about people who cut the tree out in the forest and then how they deck it with silver and with gold and fasten it with nails and with hammers.
That is the definition of a literalist interpretation. They're saying the process described in the Old Testament for creating a condemned idol is identical to what we do today.
It's a one-to-one match in their view. And this interpretation allows the speaker to argue that the Christmas tree is specifically identified by God as a vain custom.
Meaning what exactly? Vain.
It means no good, worthless, pointless, and that it's an object of idolatry. The source even paints this picture of parents, sitting in their living room drinking coffee, just admiring the tree.
And that act of admiring it.
But idolizing it.
Yeah.
Making the tree the focus of worship, not God.
Okay, so if the tree is idolatry, then we have to talk about the most explicitly Christian symbol of all, the nativity scene, the manger. I mean, it's a depiction of the nativity, the core Christian event. How on earth do they justify calling that, including the little statue of baby Jesus, blasphemy?
This is probably the most shocking claim for most people, and it's founded on a very, very rigid application of the second commandment.
Make no graven image.
Exactly. Make no image of me. The source just aggressively denounces the whole setup. It even calls the statue the dirty, ugly plastic baby.
That is incredibly harsh language.
Yeah.
What's the theological reasoning for that?
There are really two main arguments. First, the source insists, Jesus Christ is God, and God said, make no image of me, period. So creating a physical statue of the divine is a direct violation of that command.
Okay, that's one part. What's the second?
The second part is maybe more unique to this teaching. The source really stresses that God ain't no baby. The argument is that the focus should be on the resurrected adult Christ.
So by depicting him as an infant,
you're misleading people about his current all-powerful state. They argue that when Jesus walked the earth, he wasn't still an infant. So to keep depicting him as a baby is fundamentally incorrect and therefore blasphemous.
And this critique goes beyond just the manger statue, right? It extends to any visual depiction of Christ.
Oh, yes, absolutely. The source rejects all the popular images of Jesus, especially, the ones with blonde hair and blue eyes, or sometimes even dreadlocks. The logic is simple. Since no one alive has met the resurrected Christ, nobody can possibly know what he looked like.
So any picture is just an invention.
An invented image, created by man, and therefore just another example of the way of the heathen.
Okay, that moves us pretty logically to the figure who drives the whole modern secular side of the holiday, Santa Claus. The sermon delivers a really personal, sharp critique here.
And it's aimed right at parents.
Yeah, at parental honesty.
This is one of the most memorable parts of the source material because the language is just so pointed. The speaker accuses parents of being deliberate liars for pushing the Santa story, and he urges them to confess the truth to their children immediately.
And there's a specific, very vivid confession he suggests, right?
Oh, yeah. It's blunt, almost humorous, but it's designed for shock value. Parents are told to admit your greedy daddy ate the cookie and your thirsty mama drunk the milk.
Wow.
The whole point is to just strip away all the whimsy and expose what they see as the parental deception at the heart of the tradition.
Yeah.
It's about demanding total honesty, which they equate with godliness.
But beyond just the lying, the source points out a major spiritual problem with Santa's role.
Yeah.
A problem that, in their view, directly challenges the authority of God.
Right. This is the core spiritual issue. Santa is put in competition with God.
How so?
Well, think about Santa's attributes. He knows if you've been bad or good.
Right?
He's seemingly everywhere on Christmas Eve. According to the source, these are attributes that belong only to God, omniscience and omnipresence.
I see. So by giving those powers to Santa,
the tradition actively waters down the power and uniqueness of God. It makes the whole practice deeply spiritually problematic.
And what about the physical act of visiting Santa at the mall? That's also condemned.
Condemned with equally strong language, yes. The source does not hold back. It specifically calls the mall Santa an old pervert.
An old pervert.
Yes. And they question the parents. Why would you, who are so careful about stranger danger all year, stand by and just passively watch while your child sits between the legs of a man you don't know? It completely reframes this cherished tradition into a dangerous, morally compromising act.
The speaker doesn't stop with just families, though. They pivot to an even broader target: the religious institutions, the churches that promote the holiday. The source calls the institutional church the biggest racket in the world.
And this is where the critique broadens out into a societal one about hypocrisy and financial corruption. The source goes after pastors who focus obsessively on money.
Like what kind of examples?
The classic one, like pastors who claim God told them they need a private jet. The argument is simple. If the message is focused on material gain, that message came from the devil. The lack of biblical teaching and the constant focus on fundraising just turns the church, in their view, into a financial racket.
And this spiritual hypocrisy, they see it in the private home as well.
Absolutely. The source highlights what it calls the devastating contradiction of a Christian home that has all the symbols of a heathen, the Christmas decor, but at the same time it has a bar or a six-pack of beer or cigarettes.
So these homes are defined by worldly things, not by the Bible.
Exactly. They become functionally heathen.
The charitable giving that often defines the Christmas season also comes under fire. We see churches ramping up their community outreach in December. Why is that criticized?
It all comes back to a lack of consistency. The source criticizes churches that basically ignore their local community for 11 months of the year, but then suddenly get a spell from hell and start performing charity, like giving out turkeys, only in December.
So it's seen as performative.
It's seen as performative worldliness. It's designed to distract from the holiday's pagan roots and create this illusion of goodness that only lasts for a few weeks instead of being a year-round commitment to what they see as scriptural mandates.
So given this absolute unbending stance, we have to look at the lifestyle implications. This is not about moderation. This is about complete separation.
It truly is absolute separation. The mandate is extreme. The source explicitly forbids giving or accepting gifts. It forbids participating in Christmas parties.
Even at work.
Even baking for a party at work is prohibited. The very act of contributing is seen as endorsing the celebration. It goes so far as to suggest refusing a Christmas bonus from your job.
Why the bonus?
Because accepting that money, in their view, is tacitly endorsing hedonism and the condemned holiday it's associated with.
That commitment to separation must run into the most emotionally difficult reality, which is family conflict. What does the source say about attending Christmas dinner with family who do celebrate?
The stance is, well, it's heartbreakingly clear, and it's uncompromising. If your spouse or your in-laws are having a Christmas dinner, the true believer must refuse to join.
Which creates an immediate, profound rift in the family.
A huge one. The source poses this ultimate, painful question to the believer. Who is your God, Jesus, or your wife? It highlights that the mandate to separate trumps all familial ties, all emotional harmony.
That goes far beyond just theology.
It's a lifestyle mandate that can rupture families. It demands you prioritize what you see as scriptural obedience over spousal comfort, over everything.
Let's bring this whole framework back to the main rule then. The emphasis on scriptural authority. This level of rigidity must require a very specific use of the Bible.
It does. And the source uses Romans 15, verse 4, to really solidify this approach.
What does that verse say?
It says that whatsoever things were written aforetime was written for our learning. The source uses this to assert that every single belief, every tradition, every action must be rooted directly and explicitly in the scriptures.
So it can't be based on the preacher's opinion
or what some famous person believes or what tradition says. None of that matters.
The entire system of belief becomes a kind of legal framework. If it's not commanded in the Bible, it has to be rejected.
Exactly. It relies heavily on applying Old Testament law, again, citing Leviticus 10:10, the requirement to make a difference between holy and unholy. If a tradition isn't explicitly found and endorsed in the Bible, it automatically falls into the unholy category. It's the way of the heathen, and it must be rejected.
And this demand for separation, surprisingly, extends even into politics.
It is surprising, but it follows the same logic. The source explicitly states that you cannot vote for political candidates. Doesn't matter if they're Democrat or Republican, if their agenda is not identical to the Bible's agenda.
And the reasoning.
Because participating in a system that doesn't fully conform to God's law, even by just casting a vote, is defined as strengthening the hand of an evildoer.
So they see political engagement itself as endorsing worldliness.
Unless the candidate is perfectly aligned with their specific interpretation of religious law.
Yes. So after all that, what does this all mean for you, the learner, trying to process this extremely rigid perspective?
I think the key takeaway is to see the deep consistency of the source material. This viewpoint challenges cherished traditions, not because of some emotional dislike, but because of a rigid, literal, almost legalistic interpretation of very specific scripture.
Jeremiah 10, Luke 1, Leviticus 10.
Right. And that structure is what justifies the complete rejection of Christmas as, and this is their phrase, a spell from hell. The message is about demanding absolute biblical purity and total separation from anything they deem worldly.
And that commitment to separation, as you said, is absolute. We heard the source use that remarkable analogy. Even if you don't smoke, just providing a light for someone's cigarette is seen as strengthening the hand of evildoers.
And that analogy is really the final thought for you to consider. This perspective demands an extreme level of scrutiny over every single daily action. If that rule, the rule of not strengthening the hand of an evildoer, is the standard for everything, a standard that governs whether you accept a gift or bake a cake for a coworker or cast a vote. Where does the boundary between holy and unholy truly exist in your entire daily life according to this highly critical perspective?
It forces a reflection on how closely anyone's routine choices align with these absolute, uncompromising scriptural mandates.